I always thought the worst kind of betrayal would come from a stranger. But it didn't. It came from my daughter, Brielle. She walked back into my house after 5 years, smiled like I still owed her something, and before I could blink, she took my car, drained my savings, and gutted my living room to build what she called an entrepreneur studio. Said it was for the family legacy. Like I was just the foundation she needed to step on, not the man who built the damn house with his bare hands. I didn't yell, didn't fight. I just packed what was left of my life into my old truck, left in the middle of the night, and built a real legacy without her. Quiet, strong, mine. She found out the day her followers started tagging me in their reviews. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me thank you for your continuous support. If you love stories like this one, support us by subscribing to this channel and comment where you are watching us from. It will be great to hear from you. Now let's jump into the details of what happened. I always figured the house would be quieter after retirement. Not silent, never that, but peaceful. The sort of quiet that sinks into your bones and says, "You've done your part, now rest." I earned that peace. 37 years bending over cars, busting knuckles on engines, inhaling grease and grit until my lungs felt heavier than my heart. 3 decades running my own garage, only to hand over the keys one fall morning when the knees started to go and the sleep wouldn't stay. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life between fishing trips, coffee on the porch, and the occasional side job fixing up an old truck for a neighbor who remembered what a craftsman could do with his hands. And then Brielle moved back home. Now, I want to be clear about something before I go any further. I love my daughter. Lord knows I do. I raised her after her mother died when Brielle was just 9. Took her to school, packed her lunches, sewed her dance costumes with bloody fingers because I refused to let her feel the absence of a mother more than she already did. Every single decision I made since 2006 had her name stamped on it. She was my reason. So when she called last summer, voice thick with stress and city noise bleeding through the receiver, saying she needed to come home for a little while, I didn't hesitate. Not for a second. I said, "You still got a key? Good. The door's open." She showed up 3 days later with 3 suitcases, 2 ring lights, and a 6-foot-tall fake plant that didn't even fit through the front door properly. "I'm doing content now," she said, brushing past me like it was the most natural update in the world. Branding, coaching, influence building. Entrepreneurship meets authenticity. I didn't know what the hell that meant, but I smiled anyway. For the first week, I didn't ask questions. She was my daughter, and she looked tired, hair pulled back in a tight bun, skin paler than I remembered, eyes scanning her phone like it was feeding her oxygen. I figured she just needed some time to decompress. Maybe recharge in the quiet that filled the house when I wasn't playing the blues too loud or fussing over an old radio on the workbench. Then came the day I walked into my own living room and stopped dead in the doorway. The couch, gone. Not moved, not shifted. Gone. In its place stood a folding table stacked with makeup palettes, mic wires, and a half-drunk smoothie. My recliner? Pushed against the far wall like a piece of scrap. The walls were lined with those foam sound panels like she was building a studio. My lamp was missing its shade. A giant ring light buzzed in the corner like a surgical halo. I stood there for a full minute before I said anything, just taking it in. The air didn't smell like home anymore. It smelled like burnt LED and synthetic ambition. "Brielle," I finally said, my voice low and calm. "Where the hell is my couch?" She looked up from her phone, barely blinking. "I put it in the garage. I needed clean space. Natural light. You don't even use this room, Dad." I laughed. I couldn't help it. Not because it was funny, but because that was the most absurd, disrespectful thing I'd ever heard. "I don't use it. I watch the game in here every Sunday." That was my recliner. She tilted her head like she was speaking to a toddler. "Dad, you can still sit." I didn't throw it out. It's just repurposed. This is for the family legacy. The what now? She gestured around like she was unveiling a masterpiece. The brand I'm building. Coaching women on business confidence. Authentic self-expression. I'm creating something that matters. Something that'll last. I looked at her, then at the fluorescent nightmare of a setup she'd built in what used to be my sanctuary. I wanted to yell. I wanted to scream and stomp and remind her who paid for every square foot of this place. But I didn't. Instead, I just nodded slowly and said, "We'll talk about this later." Because in that moment, I realized something I hadn't seen before. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't a little while. This was a takeover. Let me continue. Chapter 1 is just getting into the heat. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bed, staring up at the ceiling fan as it spun shadows across the room, listening to the faint hum of her equipment through the walls. Every once in a while, I'd hear her laughing into her mic, performing for a crowd of strangers who knew her voice better than they knew mine. It felt like my house had been rented out to someone who shared her face, but none of her memories. None of the warmth I remembered from the little girl who used to sit in that same living room, watching Saturday morning cartoons with a bowl of cereal balanced on her knees. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen and found a note on the fridge. Not a conversation, not even a text. A damn sticky note. Borrowing the car. Need to meet a client for content collab. Thanks, Dad. Legacy in motion, winky face. My truck keys were gone. I stood there in front of the fridge for a long time, just letting the absurdity settle. She had taken the sedan, the car I used for errands, doctor appointments, and Sunday drives, and just gone. Without asking. Without even thinking she needed to. I made a cup of black coffee and sat out on the back porch, staring at the overgrown hedges I kept meaning to trim. I thought about her mother, how Janine would have handled this. She had a quiet strength to her. She wouldn't have yelled, either. No, she would have just looked Brielle dead in the eyes and asked one question. Do you think you're being fair? It always worked. But Janine was gone, and it was just me. And fairness hadn't seemed to matter in this house for a long time. When Brielle came back that afternoon, she walked in like nothing was wrong. Tossed her designer bag on the table, took out her phone, and started scrolling. You good, Dad? She asked, not even looking up. I sipped my coffee cold now. You borrow the car without asking? She gave a dismissive shrug. I left a note. A note ain't permission, Brie. She sighed. You always do this. Make everything a problem. I had a collab meeting. It was important. And you weren't using it. That's not the point, I said, voice sharpening. The point is, you keep taking things, my space, my time, my car, and acting like it's owed to you. She finally looked up, eyes hard, defensive. I'm not taking. I'm building. For us. For the family name. You don't see it now, but I'm working on something big. Then build it with your own 2 hands. Not mine. That shut her up for a beat. You think I don't work hard? She snapped. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to stay visible online? To manage engagement, brand strategy, marketing. You think posting videos is hard? I cut in, standing now. You ever rebuilt a transmission in July? You ever stood in oil up to your ankles just to make rent? I didn't build this house for likes and followers. I built it so you'd never have to do what I did. She blinked. Her jaw clenched. And for the first time since she moved back in, she looked small again. Like the little girl who used to cry when she scraped her knee, waiting for me to clean it up with warm water and quiet patience. But that moment passed quick. She looked away, mumbled something about being late to film, and disappeared into the so-called studio. I stood in that kitchen long after she left, the silence thick and tight in my chest. There's something about being ignored in your own home that ages you quicker than any labor job. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. Not just because of the lights and cameras, but because I no longer had a place in it. Everything was hers now. The living room, the car, the airspace. Hell, even the kitchen table had been turned into a product display in one of her videos. I saw it last night, her hands elegantly arranging skincare bottles while my old coffee stain sat just out of frame. I thought about calling someone. Maybe my brother. Maybe my old co-worker, Reggie, who still ran a small garage outside Chattanooga. But I didn't. What was I going to say? Hey man, my grown daughter took over my house and calls it a legacy. It sounded pathetic. Like I'd let her walk all over me. Like I didn't know how to say no. But I did know how. I just hadn't used that muscle in years. Not since Janine passed. The next few days passed in this weird in-between state. She would float in and out of the house like a wind-up doll on a schedule only she understood. Sometimes I'd come home from a walk and find her filming with strangers, some girl in heels coaching her on posture, some guy adjusting her lighting. No introductions. No respect. And me? I took to spending more time in the garage. That space, at least, hadn't been tainted. Yet, I started fixing up an old bench I'd salvaged years ago. Oak, heavy, nearly cracked through in the center. I didn't have a client for it, but I needed to do something with my hands. Something real. I'd lost count of how many times I ran the sander across that wood, but every pass felt like it scrubbed a little resentment off me. Then one afternoon, quiet, no wind, sun hanging low, Miguel showed up. Miguel rented the small apartment above my garage. 26, respectful, quiet. Paid on time. The kind of tenant a man prays for. He worked part-time at a brewery and did digital art in his off hours. We didn't talk much, but when we did, he always seemed to see things too clearly. "Damn," he said, peering over my shoulder at the bench. "That's beautiful work, Mr. Carson. Just something to keep the blood flowing." I muttered, not looking up. He nodded slowly, watching the way my hands moved over the wood. "You good?" he asked. I hesitated. Then I said it, flat, like a dropped wrench. "My daughter turned the living room into a content studio. Says she's building a legacy." Miguel let out a soft whistle. "Bold move. Is that what they're calling it now?" I said, setting down the sander. He leaned against the doorframe, thoughtful. "Sometimes people don't want to build legacies. They want to hijack them. Use your foundation as their shortcut." I didn't respond, but his words sat heavy. I felt them settle in my spine, just under the part of me that still hoped she'd snap out of it. "She's got you twisted," he added. "You ever think she's not building something for the family, just burning down what you already built?" That's when I stopped what I was doing and looked him straight in the eye. "I raised her better than this." He nodded again, slow. "Maybe, but respect's not genetic, man. It's earned, and you've been giving it out like it's free." I didn't say anything, just picked up the sander again. He took the hint and walked off, but his words stayed behind. That night, I stood in the doorway of my living room, her studio, and stared at what used to be mine. The soft amber light I installed years ago had been replaced with harsh LED. The TV, my pride and joy during football season, was now mounted behind a whiteboard with content plan, Q4 written in bold letters. She'd even thrown a scarf over the mantel, hiding the family photo that used to sit dead center. It was like she'd erased me, on purpose. And the worst part? She wasn't even malicious about it. She genuinely thought this was hers to take. That was when I realized I no longer had a home. I just had a room in someone else's production set. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't yell. I just went back to the garage, pulled out an old sketch pad, and started making plans. Not revenge, not even escape. Just a future. Mine. And I'd build it the same way I built everything else. With grit, tools, and silence. But this time, I'd take the legacy with me. The thing about losing your grip on a place is you don't always notice it until it's damn near gone. Like waking up one morning and realizing you're a guest in a house you paid off 20 years early. That's what it felt like over the next 2 weeks. I didn't say much. Didn't argue. Didn't even ask for my couch back. But every step I took in that house felt like I was walking through someone else's blueprint. Not mine. And Brielle? She was thriving. At least, in her own mind. She wore this air of invincibility, like she'd finally found her calling and everyone else just needed to fall in line or get out of the shot. Her voice took on that sharp, performative tone even off camera. Everything was about content flow, brand synergy, coaching tiers. She dropped real conversations in favor of phrases I swear were pulled straight off a whiteboard at a seminar no one asked her to attend. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and found 2 strangers sitting at the table. Both had laptops open, mics clipped to their collars, and iced coffees sweating all over my coasterless table. "Hey," one of them said without looking up. "You must be the dad. We're setting up for Brielle's workshop. She said we could use the space." I froze mid-step. "She said you could use my kitchen?" The other guy chuckled. "It's more of a co-working space now, isn't it?" I didn't respond. Just turned, walked out the back door, and sat on the porch in my robe with my coffee and a sinking feeling in my gut that no amount of caffeine could fix. That night, I finally said something. She was editing a video on the couch, the same couch she'd once banished to the garage and dragged back inside after realizing ring lights made her shadows look too clinical. I sat down in the armchair she tried to throw out. My voice was calm, but my hands were clenched. "Brielle, We need to talk about the house. She kept clicking. Can it wait? I'm behind on edits. No, I said. It can't. She looked up, sighing loud like I'd asked her to donate a kidney. I laid it out, point by point. The car. The strangers in my kitchen. The fact that I had to eat lunch in the garage because the dining table was covered in shipping supplies. I told her I felt like a squatter in my own home. That I'd open the door for her when she needed help, not a film set. That what she called legacy felt a whole lot more like a takeover. She didn't take it well. I can't believe you're being this rigid, she snapped. This is bigger than you. It's bigger than me. I'm building something that matters, and all you can think about is your chair and your quiet time. It's my house, I said, jaw tight. That still means something, doesn't it? She stood up, arms crossed, the same way Janine used to stand when she knew she was right. Except Janine was never this condescending. You want me to leave? She asked. Fine. I'll just pack up and leave. Go be another failed story you can tell your garage buddies. My daughter had big dreams, and I crushed them with my ego. Is that what you want? No, I said softly. I want you to respect the man who gave up everything so you could dream in the first place. Silence. She blinked. Her mouth opened like she wanted to fire something back. But nothing came. Just a stare, long, wounded, and cold. She turned without another word and walked into her room. The door shut hard. I didn't sleep again that night. Not because of noise this time, but because of stillness. A tense, unnatural kind of silence that clung to the walls and made the whole house feel like it was holding its breath. I stared up at the ceiling fan again, watching the same blade catch the light every few seconds, and thought about what she'd said. That I was crushing her dreams. That her leaving would be just another failure I'd have to wear on my chest like a scar. But here's the thing. I wasn't scared of failure. I'd failed more times than I could count. I'd botched jobs, lost money, gotten it wrong as a parent more times than I'll ever admit out loud. But I never once stopped showing up. That was the difference between me and Brielle. I showed up. No cameras, no applause, no brand partnerships. Just sweat, spit, and soul. So when the sun came up, I made a decision. I was going to set boundaries. For real this time. After breakfast, I knocked on her door. She opened it with a glazed-over look, her face halfway done in makeup like she was about to film another video about balancing energy or some crap. We need to talk again, I said. And this time, you're going to listen. She rolled her eyes but stepped out. I led her to the kitchen, not the living room, because I wasn't about to have a conversation surrounded by ring lights and tripods like I was a guest star on her show. I poured us both coffee. Black. No sugar. Just how her mom used to make it. I've been thinking, I started, keeping my tone level. About what you said. About dreams. And legacy. She sipped her coffee like it was just another podcast guest talking. And I realized something. You're not trying to build a legacy. You're trying to build a stage. And the people who help you get there? They're props. Background furniture. She set the mug down a little too hard. That's not fair. No, I said. It's the truth. I pulled out a printed paper from my back pocket. An actual list of house rules and expectations. Simple stuff. Ask before borrowing the car. No strangers using my kitchen without my say-so. No filming in the living room after 9 p.m. And one final line at the bottom, underlined twice. This is my home, not your content studio. She read it with a look of disbelief. You made a list? She scoffed. Are you serious right now? Dead serious, I said. This isn't me being controlling. This is me taking back what I built. She stood, pacing now, hands waving like she was performing. Do you even hear yourself? You're acting like some bitter old man who can't handle change. This is what people do now, Dad. We create. We build platforms. I looked at her, really looked. She wasn't a little girl anymore. But she sure as hell wasn't grown in the ways that counted. You're right, I said. This is what people do now. But you forgot the part where you build your own damn house first. She froze. And just like that, the conversation shifted. I think you should start looking for your own place, I added. You've been here 5 months. That's long enough for a reset. But you're not resetting. You're just taking. Her face twisted. Shock. Then offense. Then something close to pain. You're kicking me out. I'm asking you to grow up, I said. That starts with building your dream on your own foundation, not mine. She didn't cry, didn't scream. She just walked out. And for the first time in months, I sat at my own table and finished my coffee without the sound of someone else's hustle drowning out the quiet. She didn't come home that night. I waited until after dark, sitting in the garage with the bench half finished, my tools scattered around me like old friends I no longer had the patience to listen to. I kept glancing at the driveway through the side window, expecting headlights. A door slam, her rushed footsteps, but nothing came. And when I finally went inside, when the hallway light stayed off and her bedroom door remained untouched, I felt two things: relief and grief. Relief because the silence returned. Grief because I knew something inside her had cracked, and I had been the one to swing the hammer. The next morning, I found her in the kitchen. She was wearing sunglasses indoors, which meant she either hadn't slept or she'd been crying. Probably both. She didn't say a word, just poured herself some almond milk and stood by the counter like a stranger waiting for a cab. "You okay?" I asked. She didn't look at me. "I found a short-term sublet. Downtown. I'll be out by the end of the week." I should have felt victorious, like I'd finally drawn the line and she'd respected it. But all I felt was the cold after a fire dies. No warmth. No smoke. Just ashes. "That's fast," I said. "I've been looking," she replied. Figured this was coming. The bitterness in her voice wasn't sharp. It was dull, tired, worn thin like the heel of a shoe that's walked too far on bad pavement. "I didn't want it to be like this," I said quietly. "But I need my house back. I need my life back." She finally turned, lowering the glasses. Her eyes were red, but dry. "You don't get it," she said. "I wasn't just doing this for me. I thought if I could build something big enough, loud enough, maybe it would make all the sacrifices worth it." I stared at her, stunned. "Worth it? All those years of you killing yourself at that garage," she continued, voice cracking. "The late nights, the bills, the birthdays we barely celebrated. I thought maybe if I made something out of myself, if I made people notice us, maybe it wouldn't have all been for nothing." And there it was. Not entitlement, not ego, just desperation. The kind that festers when a child sees their parent work themselves raw and starts to believe value only comes from visibility. That love needs an audience to be real. I stepped closer. "Brielle, nothing I did was ever for nothing. You don't have to fix the past by sacrificing your present. You just have to live a life you can be proud of. That's enough for me." She looked at me for a long time. And then, quietly, she nodded. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just shared a silence that didn't hurt for once. She moved out 4 days later. No drama. No big goodbye. Just a few boxes and a long text thanking me for reminding her what legacy really means. I kept the paper with the house rules. Not because I needed it anymore, but because it marked the day I stopped confusing love with permission. That same week, I started thinking about Tennessee again. About my brother's offer. About the spare barn he said I could turn into a workshop. A fresh start. Not running away, reclaiming. And this time, I wasn't waiting for anyone's permission. The morning I left, there was no note. No drawn-out goodbye. No last look in the rearview mirror like in those sentimental movies where the house fades behind the main character and violins swell. That wasn't how it went. I woke up before the sun, made a single cup of coffee, and drank it standing in the middle of the kitchen I once built with my own 2 hands, tile by tile, cabinet by cabinet. The light was soft, gray-blue. The kind of light that makes you question if you're awake or just dreaming about being free. Brielle was already gone. She'd moved out 2 days earlier, left behind a half-empty box in the hallway labeled "For Dad," filled with stuff I didn't need. A sweater I'd bought her in high school. A photo of the 3 of us, Janine still smiling, Brielle gap-toothed and leaning on my arm like I was the whole damn world. I didn't open the box. I just carried it to the garage and placed it beside the others. There were only 5 boxes total. That's all I took from that house. A few tools, clothes, framed photos, and a battered notebook filled with old sketches and project ideas I hadn't touched in years. The rest, I left behind. Not because it didn't matter, but because I'd spent too long holding on to things that made other people comfortable. I opened the side door to the garage, stepped inside, and greeted my truck the way an old man greets an old dog. Quiet, grateful, and with more love than he's ever said out loud. She was a 1998 Ford F-150, still running, still loyal. Brielle always said she smelled like engine tears and retirement. I never corrected her. The truck bed was already loaded. I'd been packing for days, in secret, when she wasn't around. Not because I wanted to sneak out like a thief, but because I didn't want to explain myself to anyone anymore. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. The house didn't creak when I walked out the front door. It didn't beg me to stay or whisper reminders of what I was leaving behind. It just stood there, silent, unmoved, the same way it had been when I brought Janine home for the first time. The same way it had been when we carried Brielle and wrapped in pink. And now, it stood as the last place I ever let myself be ignored. I started the engine, backed out slowly, and didn't look back. The road out of town was mostly empty, just 2 lanes of cracked pavement lined with telephone poles and bitter memory. I didn't take the freeway. I didn't want speed. I wanted stillness. Time. Time to let the last 5 months drain out of me like used oil. Time to feel the full weight of what I was doing, driving away not just from a house, but from a version of myself that had been shrinking for years. I passed the diner where Janine and I used to go for late breakfasts. I didn't stop. I passed the elementary school where I once waited in the rain because Brielle forgot it was early dismissal. I didn't stop. I passed the church where we buried Janine, where I held Brielle's hand while she asked why heaven needed her mother more than we did. I didn't stop, because if I stopped, I might second-guess the peace I was headed toward. Tennessee wasn't a dream destination. It wasn't a bucket list item or a second chance at youth. It was a place where my brother, Sam, had land. A barn. Tools. Quiet. And maybe most important of all, it was a place where no one knew me as Brielle's dad. I could just be Mark again. I drove for 3 days. Slept in cheap motels. Ate gas station sandwiches. Let the road hum under the tires like a lullaby written for men who never got to rest when they were supposed to. When I finally pulled into Sam's gravel driveway, the barn was already open. He stood there with a smirk and a beer in hand, wearing that same oil-stained ball cap he'd worn since '98. "Took you long enough," he said. I stepped out of the truck, stretched, and looked around. Trees, space, no ring lights. He clapped my back. "Got your corner of the barn ready. Power's rigged. You still remember how to wire a panel." Like I forgot how to breathe. That night, we sat on the porch, drank 2 beers each, and didn't talk much. Sam never asked why I came. He just said, "You're here now. That's what matters." In the days that followed, I unpacked slowly, set up my tools, rebuilt my workbench, reorganized bolts and brushes like I was stitching myself back together with each labeled drawer. The first project I tackled was small, an antique rocker I found at a flea market. Cracked in 2 places, paint peeling like sunburnt skin. It reminded me of myself. I sanded it down, piece by piece. Repaired the joints. Reinforced the frame. Gave it new life with old hands. I didn't post it online. Not at first. But Sam kept telling me, "You ought to show people this stuff. Real work like this? People miss it. They don't even know they miss it." So one night, I set up my phone. Nothing fancy, no ring light, and filmed a time-lapse of the rocker coming back to life. No voiceover. No hashtags. Just hands, wood, and purpose. I uploaded it. Forgot about it. 2 days later, I had 15,000 views. 100 comments. People calling it satisfying, honest, real. One woman said, "This reminds me of my grandfather. Thank you." And there it was. Legacy. Not stolen. Not hijacked. Not borrowed with a sticky note. Built. The message came late on a Sunday night. I was halfway through organizing my screws. Standard, metric, wood, drywall. Each in their own labeled bin, because order calmed me in a way no self-help book ever could. The radio was playing old country. My hands smelled like pine and turpentine. I felt like myself again, the man I'd almost forgotten existed beneath all that fatherhood and quiet resentment. The notification popped up on my phone with a sound I didn't recognize. I hadn't used the platform much, just uploaded the occasional clip, barely wrote captions. It was Brielle's turf, not mine. @Coach Brielle tagged you in a comment. I clicked it. The post wasn't hers. It was someone else's, a woman in her late 20s, sitting on her own porch, holding a mug and watching a freshly restored rocker sway gently in the wind. Inspired by this amazing piece I saw on at Mark Carson Crafts. Thank you for reminding us what real craftsmanship looks like. Can't believe you're at Coach Brielle's dad. Talent clearly runs deep. And just like that, I knew. She'd found me. Within an hour, my follower count tripled. Notifications poured in. More tags. More reposts. Comments like, why didn't Brielle ever mention him? And so this is the dad she kept talking about. By midnight, she called. I almost didn't answer. My thumb hovered over the screen like it weighed 100 pounds. But I did. Hello. Her voice was sharp, panicked, somewhere between outrage and disbelief. What are you doing? Good evening to you too, I said, calm. Why are people tagging you? Why are you suddenly a creator? Are you trying to make me look bad? I closed my eyes, leaned back in my chair. I'm just doing what I've always done. Fixing what's broken. You know how this makes me look, right? She snapped. Like I've been lying. Like I hid you. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I asked, did you? She went silent. Then softer, smaller. I didn't think people would care. They care, I said. Because I'm not performing. I'm just showing up. You couldn't give me this one thing, she whispered. And that hurt. Because I had given her everything. And maybe that was the problem. No, I said gently. Because this isn't about taking something from you. It's about finally claiming something for me. She didn't respond. I didn't expect her to. I let the silence stretch between us like a cord that had finally snapped from too much pulling. Then I said the last thing she probably expected. I'm proud of you, Brielle. But pride doesn't mean silence. And legacy doesn't mean ownership. She hung up. No drama. No threats. Just a click. And this time, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt anchored. It started slow, just a ripple. A few followers here, a couple of comments there. Most were curious. Polite, even. They asked about my work. Said my videos felt grounding. Said I reminded them of their father, their grandfather, the men who built with their hands and didn't talk much. The kind of men who fixed things before they failed. I didn't know what to say to that. I'd spent so long feeling invisible, I didn't know how to wear admiration without it feeling like a borrowed coat. But by the end of the week, it wasn't just a ripple. It was a wave. People weren't just discovering me. They were comparing me, quoting things I'd said, stitching my quiet woodworking videos with clips from Brielle's old content, laughing, clapping, pointing out the irony that the man she'd called stuck in the past was now the future everyone wanted to return to. One video said, she's been preaching authenticity, but her dad just showed it. Without hashtags. Another, I'd rather watch Mark sand a bench than listen to another hustle coach tell me to raise my frequency. I didn't comment. Didn't share. I just watched. Until she responded. I should have known she would. Brielle had never let silence win an argument. She posted a reel, full makeup, perfectly lit, her voice brittle behind the usual polish. There's been a lot of talk about my family lately. A lot of opinions from people who don't know the full story. Yes, my father is on this platform now. And yes, he's talented. I've never denied that. But let's be clear, legacy isn't just about craft. It's about innovation, visibility. And some people are just good at playing victim. I watched the whole thing twice. Once as a father, then again as a man. And both times, the same cold anger settled in my chest. Not because she called me a victim, but because she truly believed visibility was the same as value. My phone lit up for hours after that. People defending me. People attacking her. People asking for a response. I didn't give them one. Instead, I went out to the barn, grabbed a fresh piece of maple, and started building a new project from scratch. No plan, no template. Just instinct. But silence has a way of being misunderstood. 3 days later, a journalist emailed me. Small-time publication. They'd seen the Family Feud online and wanted my side. Said the public was invested. Said they could help shape the narrative. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I wrote back 2 words. No comment. But the fire kept burning. And then came the voicemail. It came in just past midnight. I was half asleep, the kind of sleep where your body's down but your mind's still pacing. The phone buzzed once, then again, until it finally gave up and switched over to voicemail. I didn't plan to listen to it right away. Figured it was a spam call or maybe Sam forgetting the time again. But something in my gut told me different. I picked up the phone, thumb hovering over the play button, heart dragging heavy in my chest like an old chain. I hit play. Her voice came through, cracked wide open. No makeup. No edits. No audience. Dad, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know why you're doing it. You were supposed to support me, not compete with me. This isn't fair. Everyone's turning on me. And I didn't mean for this to happen. Her breath caught. I could hear her pacing. You say I'm building off your back, but you never let me forget what you gave up. Do you even know what it's like to grow up under that kind of weight? I was trying to make something of us. Of you. I wanted the world to know your name. And yeah, maybe I went about it the wrong way. But this isn't justice. It's betrayal. Then silence. For 3 long seconds, I thought that was it. But then she said, maybe Mom wouldn't have left me behind like this. Click. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just sat there, holding the phone like it had grown teeth and bit down. That was the cut. Not the accusation. Not the tears. But the knife of her using Janine, twisting her memory into a weapon she thought might land a deeper blow. I walked out to the barn in bare feet, flicked on the light, and stood in front of the piece I'd been working on. It was a bench again. Different wood. Different style. But it was still a place to rest. That's all I ever wanted to give her. Rest. Room. A place where she didn't have to perform. And instead, she turned it into a stage. I could have posted a video. Could have gone live. Could have poured my heart into a public explanation and let the comments pick sides like it was some family courtroom. But I didn't. I turned on the camera, showed the bench, sat down on it, and spoke plainly. I didn't script it, didn't plan the lighting, didn't wipe the dust off my jeans or hide the fact that my hands were calloused and raw from hours of carving. I just hit record and spoke like I was talking to no one in particular, but every word was meant for her. This bench, I said, wasn't built for views, wasn't built for clicks. It's not part of a launch or a legacy or a funnel. It's just wood, shaped into something useful, something solid. I looked up at the camera, eyes steady. I didn't come on here to take anything from anyone, least of all my daughter. I came on here because I needed to remember what I could still do when no one was watching. I ran my hand along the edge of the bench. Smooth, honest. Sometimes, in the name of legacy, people forget who they're building for. They trade peace for applause. They think loud means lasting. But I've been quiet my whole life. And what I built, it's still standing. Then I leaned back, the bench creaking softly beneath me. I'm not a victim. I'm not a villain. I'm a man who got tired of disappearing in his own house. And I'm done explaining that. I didn't say her name. Didn't throw her under the bus. I let the weight of what wasn't said hang in the space between me and that lens. Then I ended the video. No hashtags. No CTA. No edits. Just truth. By morning, it had 100,000 views. By noon, it had 2 million. And by that evening, hashtag Mark Built It was trending. Not because I was clever, but because I said what a whole generation of silent parents had been holding in their chests for years. The comments were flooded with stories, mothers, fathers, even grown kids who said, I see my dad in this, or I wish my parents had said something before they burned out. But buried deep in the comments, just beneath a woman saying her dad had cried watching it, was a simple one. From @Coach Brielle, I hear you now. Just 4 words. But they hit harder than anything she'd said before. I should have felt triumphant. That's what people kept telling me, anyway. Man, you're an icon now. You told her off with class. You didn't just win, you fathered the internet. Even Sam, never one to throw around compliments lightly, gave me a firm nod and said, proud of you, big bro. That was the cleanest knockout I've seen in a while. But the truth? It didn't feel like a win. It felt like loss. Not the kind that comes with slammed doors and screaming matches. No, this was the quiet kind. The kind that sneaks in after the fight, when the adrenaline's gone and all that's left is an empty chair across the table. She hadn't called since the voicemail. No apology. No rage. Just that one comment, I hear you now, buried between thousands of strangers who somehow saw me more clearly than my own daughter had. And maybe that was the part that hurt most. The fact that I'd had to go public, to go viral, just to be seen. 2 days after the bench video, a kid showed up at the barn. He couldn't have been more than 22, lean, covered in sawdust, eyes lit with that mix of nerves and hunger that reminded me too much of myself when I first started turning wrenches at 17. His name was Eli. Said he'd driven 2 hours after seeing my videos. I don't want to be famous, he said, but I want to learn how to make something that lasts. You teach? I told him no at first. I wasn't a teacher. I was just a tired man who filmed a bench. But he kept coming back. Kept showing up with questions, projects, sandpaper burns on his palms. And little by little, I let him in. He reminded me of Brielle in a way that made my chest ache. How she used to follow me around the garage, asking why bolts needed washers and if rust could grow on wood. Eli was good. Not great, but good. And he listened, which was rare for someone that age. One afternoon, he watched me finish a tabletop in silence. When I looked up, he asked, "Do you think your daughter ever understood how much of you went into this kind of work?" I didn't answer right away. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe that all those late nights, all those broken fingernails and missed dinners and quiet sacrifices added up to something she could hold in her hands and say, "My dad did this for me." But I also knew the truth. She'd seen the work. She just never understood it. "Not yet," I said finally. "But maybe one day." He nodded. That video, it meant something to a lot of people. But to her, it probably hurt. I sighed, wiped my hands on an old rag. Truth usually does. Especially when it's been waiting too long to speak. It came at dusk. The kind of dusk where the sky turns copper and everything feels soft, like the world is holding its breath before slipping into night. I'd just finished showing Eli how to level a stubborn table leg, and he'd gone home with a scrap of oak under his arm and more questions than answers. Exactly the way it should be when you're young and still learning. I was locking up the barn when my phone buzzed again. Not a call. A text. "Brielle, saw your last video, the table one. You're right. I didn't get it. I think I still don't. But I'm trying." I stared at the screen for a long time, thumb hovering over the keyboard, not sure what to say to that. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a thank you. It was honest. More honest than I'd heard from her in years. I didn't text back. Not yet. Instead, I walked inside, poured myself a glass of bourbon, and sat in the quiet, my quiet, and let the weight of it all sink in. She was trying. Maybe not at understanding my craft. Maybe not at owning the hurt she'd caused. But trying in the only way she knew how. And that was something. Not a reconciliation. Not forgiveness. But something. I picked up my phone again, typed 2 words. "Take your time." Then I set it face down. The next morning, I opened the barn early. Same wood. Same tools. But something felt different. Not lighter. Not heavier. Just cleaner. Like breathing after a long, hard cry. The fall air rolled in slow that year. The kind of cool that wakes you up early, even when you've got nothing pressing to do. The leaves started to bronze and curl, the way things do when they've given all they could. And that barn, once a blank slate, now stood as a testament to everything I had left to say. By October, orders were coming in faster than I could manage alone. Eli was practically living out back in the tiny camper Sam let him borrow, and together we turned out 2 benches, 3 tables, and a reclaimed bookshelf for a woman in Maine who said, "Your work feels like a prayer." I wasn't chasing viral anymore. I wasn't chasing anything. I was building, and that was enough. I hadn't heard from Brielle in weeks. Not after that text. No follow-ups. No double texts. Just a gap. A silence that felt less like punishment and more like space. And I left it that way. Until the package came. No note. No sender listed. Just a small cardboard box, taped neat, addressed to Mark Carson, care of Carson Craft Barn. I opened it at the workbench, blades slicing through the seal slow, cautious. Inside was a book. Hardcover. Legacy and Labor. Lessons from My Father's Hands. The author? Brielle Carson. I sat down on the stool beside the bench I was sanding. Turned the first page. She hadn't sent it to me to brag. She'd sent it to me to say, "I heard you." I told the truth. The dedication read, "To the man who built without applause," and showed me what real work looks like. I didn't understand it then, but now I build differently. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because some grief is so old, it no longer needs water to grow. I set the book aside, looked around the barn, tools where they belonged, orders lined up, wood drying in the corner, and a young man in the driveway, knocking lightly on the doorframe with sawdust in his hair. "You ready?" Eli asked. I nodded. Then I walked to the open barn door, looked out over the gold-streaked field, and felt something settle in my chest I hadn't felt in years. Not closure, not forgiveness, but firmness. A boundary, solid and unmoving. I loved my daughter. I respected her journey. But I was done shrinking so she could feel bigger. I had nothing left to prove. And everything I needed was already in my hands. That Christmas, she sent another package. A handwritten letter this time. Said she'd started coaching differently. Smaller groups. Less branding, more substance. And that she was restoring a chair from my old collection. The one she'd once called outdated. Said it reminded her of home. I smiled. Didn't rush to respond. But eventually, I wrote back. Glad you're finding your rhythm. You always had it. You just needed to get quiet enough to hear it. Legacy isn't a banner you wave. It's not a pitch deck or a viral video. It's what's left standing when the noise fades. And mine. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. But it was mine. Carved from silence, shaped by sacrifice, and grounded in the kind of love that doesn't demand attention. It just endures. If you've ever had to draw a hard line between love and self-respect, especially with family, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments. What boundary did you hold, and what did it cost? Let's talk about the legacies we build when no one's watching.